So in today's video, I want to talk about how I set up to the golf ball to draw the driver. Now, fundamentally, there's two things which you have to make sure that you're doing well first. And this is one of the things that I'm always trying to encourage student of mine to make sure they're doing as well. Drawing the driver, as we'll see throughout this video, is going to be a lot to do with your visual, so where you're looking at the golf ball and potentially where you're looking down the fairway, etc. But there's two fundamental skills that you'll need to be able to do to be able to actually have control over the ball flight in the first place. So what I wanted to do is just talk about those things first. The first one is the rotation in the backswing. Now, in the rotation in the backswing, golfers, you've heard it before, you know, you want to hit up on the ball, you want to swing to the right, and what golfers tend to do is they tend to end up sort of just moving this way behind the ball. It doesn't work that way, because coincidentally what happens with golfers who tend to move the head excessively off the ball in the backswing position is you don't turn correctly. So from the sidearm perspective, all that happens is you end up actually standing up. We don't want that, because if you're standing up and you're moving close to the ball, you'll never be able to draw it. So an easy thing to do is just first of all focus on your rotation. Place an alignment stick, I would say, in line with your trail ankle, similar to what I'm demonstrating here. Put the golf club across your shoulders, try and keep your head still, and just make sure you make a nice rotation to the point where when you look down at it, the golf club that's across your shoulders is pretty much on line with the one in line of your right ankle. What this does is this encourages a nice rotation, but you've got to bear in mind with driver, you would do things like move the ball further forward quite naturally, so it would produce a little bit more of a sort of tilting motion. But quite simply from here, you would just concentrate on rotating, keeping your head still, shifting the weight slightly towards your right side, whilst trying to get your shoulders to match up to the alignment stick that's in line with the right ankle. If you can get that skill done first, that's then going to give you the capability to work on this next part. So the next stage is we need to find a way to hit up on the golf ball. And then the way you're actually going to do this is a lot to do with, again, your sort of rotational movement. So you can either use an alignment stick or you can use your golf club for this part. But what I want you to do is I want you to concentrate. If I have this good rotation in the backswing, as I start my downswing, what we need to get the feeling is my lead shoulder is moving up and behind me like this. Or if you like, my right shoulder's dropping down. You can play around with it, whatever you feel works best. But again, I've got my rotation. So as I start the downswing, I don't want to pivot this way. Pivoting this way would be acceptable, but it's not going to help me hit a draw. This is going to encourage the club to come down more, should we say, a little bit steeper on the back of the ball. We've got to try and find a way to get the club to strike up on the ball. So from this backswing rotational position, I now need to find a way to rotate where I feel like as I'm sort of pulling my left hip back, see the way I'm keeping my head still, but my emphasis really is in the backswing. I've turned, I've put weight in towards the ground. I'm now kind of feeling like I'm using that right leg to feel like I'm pushing that energy and that lead shoulder up in the air behind me. And this is going to create me to have the ability for when I'm here in my arms, as my lead shoulder goes up, the club is going to drop down. Now, how many videos have you watched where it's the pro, like the proper touring pro, who talks about dropping their arms down as they start the downswing? And that's true, but it's also inevitable. Everybody's arms actually drop in the downswing. The thing that's going to exasperate that feeling is a lot to do with your shoulder move, and that's key. So if I show you from this perspective, if I sort of swing back with a good rotation, and then I get that feeling of, I just demonstrate here, my lead shoulder going up, see the way that my hands just drop down. If I sort of rotate my chest and everything maybe a bit more towards target, see my hands go more out. So if you're going to try and draw the driver, we need to find a way to get these arms dropping downward. The way you're going to get your arms to drop downward is your lead shoulder going upward. So again, I think the two skills that you fundamentally need before you can really start experimenting down the range is you need recognition for a good rotation in the backswing, and you also need to be aware of how you're starting the downswing to the point where it influences the shoulder. So let's go back to the basics. So once you've learned those basic things, so good rotation in the backswing and how you're supposed to start the downswing to influence the shoulder, you can then start to visualize a bit more how you're going to change the ball flight. So there's two things that we're going to have to do. The first one is we have to get the feeling that we're guiding the club to the right of the target whilst we're simultaneously closing the club face. Now that sometimes takes a little bit of convincing. The way I get around that is I literally picture my fairway when I'm down the driving range or if I'm playing golf, and the first thing I'm trying to do is I'm trying to swing the club to the right of that fairway. So I'm intentionally swinging the club in the direction, not down towards the fairway, but actually way to the right of the fairway. Now, when I'm doing that, I have to then make sure that I am getting the feeling of the club face closing. Because if I try and swing down towards the right of my fairway and I leave the club face pointing in that direction, that's exactly where the ball's going to go. So I try and get that feeling of closing the club face as I'm swinging towards the right. The way I do that is I concentrate my attention on the inner quadrant part of the golf ball. So if I was to divide the golf ball up into quarters, I'm focusing, from my perspective, on that back right portion. That's enough for me to concentrate on the feeling of hitting the inner part of the golf ball with a sense of closing the face to help me start the ball to the right and get it curving back around. Now, other things I'm doing is I'm making sure that I have a nice wide stance. The reason why I have a nice wide stance is I feel like it slows my body down. Sometimes if I have a narrow stance, I can get a little bit heavy on the rotation. That again makes that shoulder kind of pop more down, makes me strike too much down on the ball. A wider stance feels like it slows my body down a little bit and gives me that chance to get more of the feeling of my shoulder moving back, dropping the club from this position, and then I can hit that inner part of the golf ball. I also experiment with the ball further forward in the stance. And the reason again why I do this is if I have the ball further forward, this helps me get that feeling of the shoulder going up, and again it emphasises this sort of sense of hitting more up on the golf ball. The last one fundamentally comes down to the tee height. I think if you can move the ball further forward, concentrate on the inner part of the golf ball and experiment with a slightly higher tee peg, all of those things are going to encourage you to then do the technique that's required. So the more I move the ball further forward, the more I concentrate on the inner part of the ball, the higher I tee the ball is going to encourage me to want to move more this way and this way. The more I move the ball back and the lower I tee it is going to encourage me to move more this way and this way. So what I wanted to do with this video is I wanted to help golfers understand the setup things that you need to do, but also understand some of the technique that's really required. If you want to deliver the club as we've spoken about, you have to make sure you get a good rotation and a good shoulder move to start the downswing. And hopefully this video will just really help you out.